I'm Anna, and here's the straight scoop about how it all started. I met Jack back in high school. He was the kind of guy everyone noticed. Captain of the football team, always surrounded by a crowd, and there I was, always buried in my textbooks, aiming for straight A's. We were worlds apart, yet somehow, he noticed me. It was during one of those rare afternoons when I was actually outside, on the bleachers, trying to understand physics while half watching a practice game. He came over, sweaty and grinning, and plopped down next to me. "Hey, genius, help me out here. If I throw a football in a perfect parabola, will it impress you enough to come to the spring dance with me?" He joked, or at least I thought he was joking. I remember looking at him, the sun forming a halo around his messy hair, and laughing despite myself. "Impress me with your grades, not your throws, and we'll talk." From then on, Jack made it his mission to impress me, and impress me he did. He started showing up with his homework done, asking for study tips instead of flirting. Well, there was still flirting, but less obvious, you know? By the time the dance rolled around, I said yes, more out of curiosity than anything. We dated through the rest of high school. It wasn't always smooth, but we stuck it out, went to the same college. I majored in education, and he struggled to find his path, bouncing from one major to another. I was buried in books, and he was, as usual, the life of every party. Somehow, we made it work. He'd drag me out to parties, and I'd make him hit the books. We balanced each other out, or so I thought. After college, Jack proposed at our graduation party. It was loud, messy, totally him. He didn't get down on one knee, nothing that cliché. He just leaned over during the loud cheers, his breath smelling of beer, and yelled over the noise, "Marry me, Anna. I'm serious." It was so Jack, so spontaneous. I laughed, the sound lost in the chaos, and shouted back, "Yes, why the hell not?" We got married in a small ceremony. Only family and a few close friends. Jack looked serious for once, his eyes telling me this was the real deal. We were young, in love, and ready to take on the world. A year later, Emily came into our lives, turning our world upside down in the best way possible. She was a tiny bundle of energy, always giggling, with Jack's eyes and my stubborn chin. Life became a series of nappies, baby giggles, and trying to catch a good night's sleep. Jack took a part-time job to be around more, while I dove back into teaching as soon as maternity leave was over. I loved teaching, loved my kids at school, but it meant long hours, extra tutoring after classes to make ends meet. Our life was a mad dash from morning till night. Every morning was like clockwork. I'd be up before the crack of dawn, scrambling eggs and flipping pancakes, while the coffee brewed loud and strong. Then I'd drop Emily off at the nanny's, who was practically a second mom to her by now, and then it was off to work for me. Teaching wasn't just a 9-to-5 job for me. There were extra classes, after-school tutoring, and endless grading. I did it all to scrape together enough to chip away at our house loan and stash something away for retirement. Jack worked part-time, which helped, but it wasn't enough to ease up on the hours I needed to put in. When I'd finally get home, the house would be a mess, dinner half-made, and Jack looking like he'd wrestled a tornado. "You're late again." He'd start in as soon as I stepped through the door, his voice tight with frustration. "I'm pulling double shifts at school, Jack. You know this," I'd reply, trying to keep the tiredness from seeping into my voice. "And I'm here cleaning and cooking and looking after Emily. You think that's easy?" He'd argue back, his face a mix of anger and exhaustion. I understood where he was coming from, I really did. But it wasn't like I had a choice. "Look, I'm doing the best I can here. We've got bills to pay, and Emily's not getting any cheaper with all her school stuff." Jack's face would soften a bit at that. "I know, Anna, it's just, I get tired too, you know? And when you're late, it throws everything off." That would usually end the argument, at least for the night. We'd sit down to whatever he'd managed to put together, usually something with pasta, his go-to meal. Emily would chatter about her day, blissfully unaware of the tension. I'd go check on Emily, help her with homework or watch a bit of TV with her, trying to make up for the hours I missed. By the time her bedtime rolled around, I'd be ready to collapse. Lately, though, Jack had started making snide remarks about my late nights. With all the time you spend at school, who knows? Maybe there's a handsome math teacher keeping you late, he'd say, half joking, but with a sharp edge. I laughed it off the first time, but he kept at it. Jack, you think I have time for a lover? I barely have time to pee during the day. I retorted once, trying to lighten the mood. He didn't smile. Just saying, it's a lot of late nights, Anna. I know, and I'm sorry. But there's no one else, Jack. Just stacks of papers and a bunch of kids who can't figure out fractions. That's my wild affair, I'd say, trying to reassure him. But somehow, I could tell he wasn't convinced. His jokes became less frequent, and his glances more questioning. As Emily hit her teens, the simple, structured days began to crumble. It started with her locking herself in her room right after school, emerging only for meals. One evening, I knocked on her door, balancing a tray with a sandwich and juice. Dinner's ready. Don't eat in here, come join us. I called through the door. The answer was a muffled, "Not hungry." The lock clicked, a small but clear barrier she put up daily. Jack was already at the table, flipping through some bills, his brow furrowed. When I set his plate down, he barely glanced up. "She eating in her room again?" he asked, not really asking. "Yeah, she says she's not hungry," I replied, sinking into my chair with a sigh. Jack shook his head, pushing his plate away slightly. "We can't keep letting her do this, Anna. She needs to be part of the family, not holed up like a hermit." The weeks rolled on, each one straining the seams of our family fabric a bit more. Jack's comments about my late nights grew sharper, his patience thinner. "Another meeting today?" he'd ask as I grabbed my keys in the morning. "Yeah, parent-teacher conferences. You know how it is," I'd answer, trying to keep my voice light. "Do I? Seems like your meetings could be a cover for just about anything," he'd reply, the suspicion barely veiled. "Really, Jack? We're going to do this now?" I'd snap back, frustration boiling over. "There's nothing going on. I'm just working, for us, for Emily." He'd hold up his hands, a gesture of surrender, but his eyes were cold. "Just saying, it's a lot of nights out. Makes a guy wonder." It was a jab, and it stung more each time. Our conversations became a series of accusations and defenses, a far cry from the teamwork we used to pride ourselves on. One particularly rough evening, Emily stayed at the table with us. Jack was off again on my supposed secrets, and I was too tired to fight. "Jack, please, not in front of Emily," I hissed, my voice low but fierce. Emily, her eyes wide and watchful, finally spoke up. "Why can't you both just stop?" Her voice broke, a mix of anger and despair. "Stop fighting all the time." Her outburst shocked us into silence. Jack looked down, his anger deflating. I reached out, trying to touch her hand, but she pulled away, her chair scraping back as she stood. "I'm tired of this. It's always the same. You're both always mad," she said, her voice shaky. Without another word, she left the table, her footsteps heavy as she retreated to her room. Emily's 13th birthday was supposed to be a blast, a break from all the tension that had been building up at home. She had been eyeing this new smartphone for months, buzzing about all the things she could do with it, apps, photos, you name it. Knowing how much she loved tech stuff, I nudged Jack about getting it for her. "It's perfect for her. She won't stop talking about it," I told him one evening as we were planning the party. Jack, though a bit hesitant about the cost, agreed. "All right, let's get it. She deserves something nice, with everything going on." We planned an outdoor party, nothing too fancy, but I made sure everything was beautifully set up, balloons, streamers, and a piñata filled with all sorts of goodies. Emily's friends and their parents came over, and for a while, it felt like the old days, laughter filling our backyard. The highlight, of course, was the gift opening. Emily tore through the wrapping paper, her face lighting up when she saw the smartphone. "Oh my gosh, thank you, thank you. She was practically bouncing with joy, showing it off to her friends. But the happiness didn't last long. About half an hour later, she came up to me, her face stormy. "I don't want this," she said abruptly, pushing the phone into my hands. I was confused. "What? You've wanted this for months. What's wrong?" Before I could get another word in, she grabbed the phone back and threw it against the wall. The screen shattered with a sickening crack, and the room went silent. Everyone was staring, and I felt my face heat up with embarrassment. "Emily, what on earth are you doing?" I snapped, my voice louder than I intended. "Your father spent a lot of money on that. It was expensive, and you begged for it." She didn't respond, just glared at me with tears brimming in her eyes, then turned and stormed off to her room, slamming the door behind her. The party broke up awkwardly after that. I apologized to the guests, trying to smooth things over, but the festive mood was ruined. "I'm so sorry about all this," I told them, my voice shaking a bit. "I don't know what got into her." When the last guest left, I tried talking to Emily, knocking softly on her locked door. "Honey, please, can we talk about what happened? I don't understand why you did that." There was no answer, just the heavy silence that had fallen over the house. Jack put a hand on my shoulder. "Let her cool down. We'll sort it out later." The morning after Emily's outburst, the house was eerily quiet. Jack left early for work, a tense goodbye hanging between us. I needed to understand what happened, so I waited for Emily to come down for breakfast. Can we talk about yesterday?" I asked gently as she picked at her toast. She sighed, setting down her knife. "Mom, I found something on the phone right after I turned it on. There was a spy app installed." My stomach turned. "A spy app? How did you find that?" Emily rolled her eyes, a flash of her old self. "Mom, I know my way around tech, remember? I checked the system apps and found one that didn't belong. It lets someone listen in and track where I am." I felt a chill run down my spine. "Did you check other phones, at home?" "Yes, last night. Yours had the same app. Dad's didn't." The room seemed to spin. "He put spy apps on our phones? Why would he?" "He's been acting weird, Mom. Like he doesn't trust us," Emily said, her voice trembling slightly. I was reeling from the betrayal. "I need to handle this carefully," I muttered more to myself than to Emily. "Let's keep quiet about this for now." I spent the day distracted, anger boiling inside me. As soon as I could, I took my phone to a service center. The tech there confirmed the worst. "Yes, ma'am, this is definitely spyware. Pretty advanced too." "Can you remove it?" I asked, my voice steady, despite the storm inside. "Sure thing, it'll just take a few minutes." As I waited, I thought about all the late nights, the strange questions from Jack about my whereabouts, his unfounded accusations. He didn't trust me. He'd invaded my privacy, our daughter's privacy, because of his insecurities. When the tech handed back my phone, spyware-free, I thanked him and drove home, a plan forming in my mind. I wasn't ready to confront Jack, not yet. I needed to think, to decide how to deal with his betrayal, without losing my cool. Ever since the incident with the spyware, the dynamic between Emily and me shifted dramatically. We started sharing more, not just mother and daughter talk, but real secrets, the kind that showed we trusted each other on a whole new level. One evening, while we were clearing up the dinner dishes, Emily casually mentioned something that caught me off guard. "Mom, did you know Dad goes to the other side of the city a lot in his free time?" She wiped down the counter, her voice nonchalant. I paused, a dish halfway to the cupboard. "No, he never mentioned that. Did he say why?" She shrugged. "Nope, but he's been doing it a lot. Just thought it was weird." That nagged at me more than I wanted to admit. Why hadn't Jack mentioned these trips? What was on that side of the city that drew him away from home? The doubts and the betrayal from the spyware were still fresh, and this new piece of information didn't sit right with me. Determined to get to the bottom of it, I contacted a private investigator, a guy named Martinez who came highly recommended. I laid out everything for him, Jack's recent behavior, the secret trips, the whole spyware debacle. Martinez listened, his expression unreadable, and promised to dig into it. It took a couple of weeks before I heard back from him. When my phone rang and I saw Martinez's name, my heart sank. I wasn't sure I was ready for what he might say, but I needed to know. "Mrs. Anna, we need to meet," was all he said before we arranged to meet at a quiet cafe away from our usual spots. Sitting across from Martinez, the hum of the cafe around us, I braced myself. "I found out where your husband has been going," he started, his voice low. "He's been seeing someone. A younger woman on the other side of the city. They've been meeting regularly for about a year now." My world stopped. A year. The lies, the deceit, it was almost too much to process. Martinez continued. "She's been pushing him to divorce you, planning to marry him. She even suggested he track you, hoping to catch you in a compromising situation that could help him in the divorce." I felt sick. The spyware on Emily's phone, on mine, it was all a setup, a way to trap me. "And, what did they find?" My voice was barely a whisper. "Nothing. There was nothing incriminating on your phone. That's when they decided to put the app on your daughter's phone, to gather anything that could be used." I sat there, numb, the cafe's noise fading into a buzz. Betrayed by my husband, spied on, because of his own guilt. The irony was bitter. I didn't tell Emily the details when I got home. But she saw the photos sticking out of my bag, pictures of Jack with another woman, laughing, looking happy. Emily saw the truth in my face, before I broke down and told her everything. That night, she didn't say much. She just hugged me as I cried, her arms tight around me. We spent the night in her room, the space between us filled with a new, sad understanding. Jack came home late, as if it were just another day. He smiled, asked how our day was, oblivious to the storm inside me. I didn't confront him, not yet. I couldn't let him know that I knew everything, not until I had figured out what to do next. The next day, armed with the address the detective had given me, I drove across town to an apartment complex I'd never been to before. My hands were trembling slightly as I pressed the buzzer for the apartment. The door swung open to reveal a young woman, her makeup bright and her outfit scanty. She looked me up and down with a mix of confusion and defiance. "Can I help you?" "I need to speak with Jack," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. She tried to protest, but I just pushed her away and went inside. I found Jack in the living room, his expression turning to one of shock and fear when he saw me. "Anna, this isn't what it looks like," he stammered, standing up quickly. "Save it, Jack. I know everything." I cut him off, my voice cold and firm. "I'm here to tell you face to face that I'm filing for divorce. And I expect compensation from both of you for this betrayal." Jack's face paled. "Anna, please, let me explain." Before he could continue, the door burst open and Emily walked in. My heart stopped for a second. "Emily, what are you doing here? How did you even get here?" "I took a taxi," she said, her voice trembling but her chin high. "I needed to see who Dad was choosing over us." Jack tried to approach us, desperation in his eyes. "I love you both. I'm not going to let this go so easily. We can fix this." But before more words could be exchanged, his mistress, who had been silently fuming by the door, stormed over to him. She started hitting him, her sobs loud as she clung to his legs. "You promised you wouldn't leave me," she screamed. The scene was chaotic and pathetic. I looked at Jack, caught in the grasp of a woman he had risked his family for, and felt nothing but disgust. I grabbed Emily's hand. "Let's go home," I said quietly. As we left, Jack's pleas echoed down the stairwell, mixing with the cries of his mistress. But they were just background noise, a sad, desperate soundtrack to the end of our family as we had known it. After the confrontation, the air at home felt different, like a storm had passed, leaving quiet calm in its wake. Emily and I spent the next few days in a kind of unspoken agreement, taking care of each other without bringing up the mess with Jack again. But we both knew we had to figure out our next steps. One evening, I was sorting through some bills when Emily sat down across from me, her expression serious. "Mom, what are we going to do now?" I set the papers aside, knowing this conversation was more important. "Well, we need to take care of the divorce proceedings first. I've already talked to a lawyer." Emily nodded, biting her lip. "And us? Where do we go from here?" I reached across the table, taking her hands in mine. "We start fresh, Em. Just you and me. We'll be okay. We're stronger than we think." The next weeks were a whirlwind. Meeting with lawyers, signing papers, and dealing with the endless back and forth of legal requirements. Jack tried to reach out a few times, but I kept the interactions brief, always through the lawyer. I couldn't trust myself to face him without old wounds tearing open again. Emily was focused on her online courses, her way of coping by throwing herself into her studies. "Mom, can you help me with this application? I'm trying to enroll in a more advanced tech program." "Sure, let me see." I sat next to her, looking over the application. It was good to see her taking charge of her future, something positive growing from the ruins of our past troubles. As the days turned into weeks, the divorce was finalized. The relief was palpable. The judge granted me the house and a fair settlement. Jack was required to pay support, but I wasn't going to rely on that. It was time to stand on our own 2 feet. One quiet evening, Emily and I celebrated our new beginning with a simple dinner. "To us," I toasted, raising my glass of water. "To us," Emily echoed, clinking her glass against mine. "We've got a lot of rebuilding to do," I said, looking around at the home we'd need to reshape into something new, just for us. "But we can make it ours, make it something great," Emily added, her tone hopeful. "Yes, we can. It's going to be different, but it's going to be good," I assured her, and myself. As we ate, we planned out what we wanted to change in the house, what colors to paint the walls, and how we'd rearrange the living room. It was more than just redecorating, it was claiming our space, turning it into a sanctuary for the 2 of us. Life has a funny way of sorting itself out. Sitting in our living room, the mortgage papers in front of me stamped, paid in full, I couldn't help but let out a sigh of relief. Emily and we were finally free from one hefty burden, thanks to the settlement that Jack and his mistress ended up paying. Emily was sprawled on the couch, her laptop open as she tinkered with some new software she was excited about. "Mom, check this out," she called, waving me over. I walked over and peered at her screen, amazed at her knack for coding. "Looks complicated, but I bet it's something awesome." She laughed. "It is. I'm just trying to make it user-friendly. Not everyone is a nerd like me." I ruffled her hair affectionately. "Proud nerd, you mean?" Our laughter filled the room, a sound so different from the tense whispers and strained silence of the past. Since paying off the house and settling into our new routine, the calls from Jack had been a constant annoyance. He kept saying he'd changed, that he left his mistress and wanted us back. But that ship had sailed, and I wasn't about to let him chart our course again. Just last night, he'd called again, his voice a mix of desperation and hope. "Anna, I've made mistakes, but I'm different now. Can't we try again? For Emily's sake?" I had been firm, my response cutting the conversation short. "Jack, it's too late for maybes and what-ifs. Emily and I are moving on. This is our final goodbye." After hanging up, I changed my number. No more calls, no more empty promises. Emily knew about it and supported the decision. "Was that Dad again?" she had asked, her tone wary. "Yeah, but it's handled. New beginnings, remember?" I replied, trying to keep the mood light. She nodded, coming over to give me a hug. "I'm glad it's just us now. We're better off, Mom." And she was right. We were better off, financially and emotionally. I enrolled in a few online courses to enhance my teaching credentials, and Emily was diving deeper into her tech projects. We were not just surviving, we were thriving. Sometimes, late at night, I'd sit on the porch, sipping tea, and reflect on everything that had happened. The pain, the betrayal, but also the immense growth and the unbreakable bond it had forged between Emily and me.